Hey, Jonathan here. I've got a question from Nick Kota. Hope I said that right. And it is this. I have a client that wants to prepay for access to me for next year so he can get the cost on this year's budget. Given that we don't have anything more than broad strokes view of what next year's work would entail, how do you recommend pricing this kind of retainer/work? So we don't have any formal projects scoped out in the upcoming year except some big picture ideas. He wants to reserve my time, essentially. I know he won't use much of my time in January through March, but in April he's planning on moving the company operations to a new location. He's going to need help with designing the optimal plant layout, and so on and so forth. He wants to get the fees on this year's budget so he can use this year's expenses as a bigger write-down in the name of business growth initiatives. This is his first year of owning a business. Okay, so this is a pretty juicy question. I'm not going to be able to answer it specifically enough for Nick, I think, because it depends on a couple of things. So I'm going to make some assumptions and maybe give you a couple different ways to think about it. But this time of year, I'm recording this right before Thanksgiving in the US. So it's, approaching the end of the year, we're getting into holiday season, and this kind of thing does come up. You can use this to your advantage, where you want to close a deal, they want to get it into this year's budget so that they can use up whatever's left over so they get another big budget next year. So this is actually a good thing. And you probably want to take advantage of it. The fear is that you make some kind of promise to an unbounded scope that then is just, you end up feeling like you lost money or you didn't charge enough, that sort of thing. So if you don't know what outcome they're looking for, there's nothing to price. But what you could do, and I don't know what your billing model currently is or your pricing model currently is, but you could just sell them a huge block of hours. If you are already billing by the hour for your work and you're maybe sending hourly estimates, and I get the sense that that might be the case here, you could just say, hey, here's a giant number of hours. I'll let you prepay for them. Maybe you put some restrictions on maximum number of hours worked per week or something like that. But you could say like, oh, well, you can buy 500 hours from me next year and I'll work up to a maximum of 30 per week or whatever. And they don't expire until the end of the year, but you have to use them up in 2020, which is next year. So you could do something like that and just sell a big block of time. Another thing you could do is maybe work with the client to get a little bit more specific about some outcome that they want from a higher level strategy engagement, even if you're not going to do it until next year. So this will be impossible if the reason the big picture ideas are just broad strokes at this point is because they literally don't know what their objectives are yet, in which case there's nothing to price. From a value perspective, there's nothing to price. But if you could talk to that person and say, what will you be trying to achieve next year? What's the big strategy goal for 2020? Or is there a particular piece of this, at least maybe the, what did you call it? The plant layout, something like that. If there's some outcome that they can predict this far in advance, you could price that. You could do a value pricing arrangement now by saying, okay, the outcome that you're going to desire next year is this thing. You want to spend the money now. It's going to be whatever it is, 10,000, 100,000, a million, whatever it is. You price it now. They give you the money. You might want to sit on the money. It'd be tempting perhaps to not sit on the money, but you might want to hang on to the money until next year. Revisit the conversation at the time. Make sure that the outcomes that they want are still the same, because you don't want to get yourself into a position where they've given you a bunch of money, you don't have it anymore, they completely changed their objective because the plant opening didn't go as expected, and you're basically an indentured servant at that point, and you don't want that situation. So don't get yourself into a scary situation there if you are going to try and value price something that's going to be happening way in the future. The person that you're talking to could get fired by then or leave and go work somewhere else. So a lot of things could happen at that point. So I'd probably hang on to the money. The other thing you could do is not take the work and say, I'm sorry, I just can't give you a proposal for something that isn't defined at all. So those are three options that hopefully will help. I don't have enough specifics to get too prescriptive, but those are the things that would usually come up in a case like this. This end of the year budget thing can be a good thing for business. So you do want to take advantage of it if you can, but you just don't want to expose yourself to a crazy amount of risk. All right, hope that helps. If you have a question for me, dear viewer, dear listener, please just hashtag AskJonathan on Twitter, LinkedIn, or YouTube, and we will find it and I'll add it to the queue. Bye.